Week and looking forward to this time of the season and parties coming up and hope everybody's excited. You know, we've been through some things in my life in the last few weeks, most of you know, and it's made me think a lot about our elderly and dealing with our elderly. And of course, we all are going to get there, right? Some of us are already there, right? I always get in trouble when I say that I'm already there, but it's one of those things of life that stage of life that we go through, I guess, if we're blessed. And I say that because I heard somebody said one time, they said, everybody gets to be young, but not everybody gets to be old. So I guess there's a blessing in that, right? But the truth is that one thing that we often struggle with at all stages in life is our dignity. We all want to have some dignity, I believe. Dignity is the state or quality of being worthy of honor or respect. And I think that's something all of us desire. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't want to be respected, doesn't want to be maybe not honored in that respect, but that we want to be respected. I think we all know what that means, to have our dignity, to have our dignity. And that's something that oftentimes in life we lose. And as I thought about this, Christ addresses us a lot in his ministry with people who have lost their dignity. And I thought about a lot of reasons why we do that in our society and what God expects you and I as Christians, how he expects us to deal with people and deal with those situations and how we should put that in our lives. The first thing that really came to mind as I was thinking about this is about the woman with the issue of blood. And it's actually one of my favorite miracles in the Bible for a lot of different reasons. But this woman had been suffering from a hemorrhage for 12 years, it says in the Bible. It tells us that she had spent all that she had to try to cure her illness, to try to cure her sickness. In that society, it wasn't just being ill, it wasn't just the illness, but that made her unclean because of this issue of blood. She was unclean, and because of that, in that society, she would have lost all her dignity. People would have looked at her as being an unclean woman and would have shunned her and would have stayed away from her. She would have lost the respect of the people around her and possibly even her own family. Some would even think she had been cursed by God. And that would have put her in a very bad situation in this particular society, wouldn't it? The idea that sometimes things happen to us that it's not our fault. Sometimes we get sick. Sometimes illness overtakes us. And because of those illnesses, sometimes we're not able to take care of ourselves the way that we once were able to take care of ourselves, or possibly provide for our family like the way that we were able to provide for our family. Illness can strike any of us at any time. We have no warning about that or no heads up, do we? It's just one day maybe we become sick. Maybe something overtakes us, whether that be a virus or whether it be some sort of a other illness that takes over, and we've probably all been there. And we laid in our bed and we didn't feel like we had much dignity, did we? Laying there in our bed, being sick, not being able to take care of ourselves, not being able to take care of our family. We were in that position, and it wasn't really of our own fault. It wasn't of our own doing. And yet we lose part of us, don't we, when that happens? We lose a lot of our dignity when that happens. It's hard to be dignified when you're sick, when you're not well. And this woman had suffered with this for years, hadn't she? She had suffered with this for 12 years. She had been like this. And I think when we read stories in the Bible and miracles in the Bible and what Jesus did, but more than Jesus healing this woman of her disease, he gave her back her dignity, didn't he? He gave her back her ability to be in society and to be with her family and to function in the way that she wanted to function. All of us want to be at a certain level, don't we? Be able to function at a certain level. And this woman was not able to do that because of the illness that had taken her. And so sometimes it's illness that causes us to lose a lot of our dignity. We have a hard time maintaining it when we're sick, when we're not well, when maybe we're not able to take care of ourselves like we would like to take care of ourselves. We're maybe not able to get up and to shower or to bathe ourselves or to clean up ourselves. And that really destroys us, doesn't it? It tears us down on the inside because we like to be able to do that, to maintain that, and especially with people who we're really close to, our family members that we're close to. And to have to rely sometimes on somebody else is a very difficult thing. You know, my father, for those of you who have met my father, and one of the questions I always get asked is, you know, where's his hand? Right? Where's his hand? You know, my father, when he was 12 years old, he lived in a little town in Colorado, Gypsum, and Gypsum's kind of between Vail and Grand Junction on I-70, and it's a mining town. And as a child, he was very poor. His family was very poor, and he would fish or hunt often to provide food for the table, and of course, his recreation, I'm sure. And one day when he was 12 years old, he had decided to go fishing, and he with a friend, and they had walking down the road, and a blasting cap, if you're familiar with that, they used to set off dynamite. A blasting cap had fallen off one of the mining trucks and was laying in the road. And my father, of course, being a 12-year-old, being a boy, as we all were, my father picked up the blasting cap and was playing with it, and it went off in his hand, and then he lost that hand. And he lost that when he was 12 years old, and I've never known him with a hand. But I know when I was a kid, people would always ask that, even classmates, and I got many a fist fight because my dad didn't have a hand, and they would make fun of my dad for not having a hand, and I would go to town. So I grew up kind of rough that way because I was more than willing to go to fist for my dad, and I did a few times. But you know, the truth is that in his world, and I've often talked to my dad, and I talked to his sister one time a few years ago. She's passed now. But she said, you know, when he lost his hand, he changed. And I can see that. Because in that society, in the world, the time my dad was young was World War II. And people wanted to go to the war. People wanted to do that. Young men were expected to go to the war. They wanted to do that. They wanted to be involved in that fight. It was patriotic. It was a duty. It was something, and when he was out of hand, he was unable to do that. And that was quite a stigma for him, that he couldn't actually do that. He was just actually a little bit young, but it was a stigma that he couldn't do that. And I talked to him that he struggled to get a job because in that sense, there was no help for the handicap in those days, and they wouldn't hire him. And so he went to work driving a milk truck, and he did that for several years, and then finally he went to work in a foundry, and he drove a truck, and worked in a foundry, and drove a truck there, and then eventually the city of Grand Junction had to put a deal in place to hire the handicapped, believe it or not, and Dad's application got in there, and he got hired for the city, worked for them for 31 years, and he had a certain tremendous amount of respect and dignity there, but it affected his life. And that's really a minor handicap compared to what a lot of people have. But yet in his age, in the day he lived, any handicap was really, really significant. And it really affected his life because he lost a lot of his dignity because he wasn't able to do what other people could do or what he was expected to do by society, if that makes any sense. And in Mark, there's this... is Bartimaeus. And Bartimaeus is a really great miracle in the Bible. Blind Bartimaeus, right? We only get his name in Mark. But it said, they came to Jericho, and as was leaving Jericho, his disciples, a large crowd, a blind beggar named Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the road. And when he heard that Jesus the Nazarene, he began to cry out and say, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. And many were sternly telling him to be quiet, but he kept crying out all the more. Son of David, have mercy on me. You know, I've often thought of blind Bartimaeus. You know, of all the handicaps to have, not to have sight, what a tremendous disadvantage that was, to be cursed by God in that respect. And Bartimaeus is crying out, Son of, have mercy on me. And they're saying, don't, you know. They're putting Bartimaeus to the side, and I'm sure it's because he's dirty and he's filthy and he's been falling down and he's blind. And they're saying, Jesus doesn't have time for you, right? Jesus doesn't have time for you. Look at you. You're a mess. You expect to see Jesus, you're a mess. I can just imagine what they were saying. And they're trying to hush Bartimaeus, trying to make him be quiet because they don't want to bother Jesus with him. And you know, I thought about that. How sometimes handicaps can rob us of our dignity. Things that maybe aren't big, we don't have any control over, right? These things that make us different from the people around us, different from society. And those things can affect how people look at us and how they talk to us and how they react to us, can't they? If you've ever been If you've ever been in an accident, you've ever had to wear braces, or you've ever had to be in a wheelchair, you've ever had to do it even momentarily, not long term, but just even momentarily, you understand what I'm saying, how people treat you differently, look at you differently, expect different things from you. A handicap can a lot of times be something that really takes away our dignity, takes away our worth, poverty, or maybe who we are. You know, there's something else I thought about that really takes away our dignity, and it's something that I see every day. You know, we see people who are often on the side of the road who are holding out something for money, to give money, to work for food. Maybe we see that sometimes, but people who are that, and you know, all of us probably have a different view in our mind when we see people like that, don't we? Or when we're approached by people like that. I don't know how you respond to those people in your mind. I know how I do, and I'm not saying that I'm always right, but I'm just saying that I don't know how you respond to people who ask you for money, who beg. And I don't know if you've ever really, and we see it in this society, we see it, people on the corner when you stop, and they might have their little basket or want you to give money to them. But if you travel overseas, and I'm sure it happens here too, but uniquely when we traveled overseas and we were in Greece, it was much more intent. They would, one woman in particular I know came up to us, and she looked pretty bad, and she was a younger lady, but not well dressed and fairly dirty. And I know she came up to us, and she was right at us, right at our feet, you know, basically just touching us and saying, you know, I need money for food for my child. It was very personal and up close, and it's really, really hard to look into the eyes of a woman, in whether you know or not she's telling the truth. It's really, really difficult for me as a person, and I would hope as a Christian, to look in the eyes of someone that's begging you at your feet to feed their child. And maybe not true. I don't know. You know, how would you know? I don't know. But the truth is that at that minute, that woman had no dignity, did she? She had sacrificed her dignity either because she wanted money for something else or maybe for her child. I don't know. I don't know any way to answer that question. But she sacrificed her dignity to kneel at the foot of a stranger and beg for money. I don't know how you would respond to that. I don't know what you would do. I don't know if she was a scammer or not, but I gave her money because I couldn't take a chance that she wasn't, and I couldn't not do something. I don't know what you do, but I know she sacrificed her dignity for whatever reason, for a handout. The truth is, a woman in Mark, I think it's a fascinating story. She had nothing, the poor widow. She didn't want anybody to see her. She didn't want anybody to notice her. She didn't want anybody to know that she was there. You see that because she put it in. You see, everybody threw their money in the pot. They threw their money into this pot because it made them look good. It gave them dignity, right? Made them worthy of honor because they threw these large amounts of money into the pot. But this woman, she put it in. She placed it. So she went up to the pot, and this little bitty coin, this little penny she had, she placed it into the pot because she didn't want people to notice her. She didn't want them to say, oh, look, that's all she put in. That's all she had. But Jesus was there, and I think the most powerful part of this to me is that Jesus not only saw this woman, but he wanted his disciples to see her too. You see, it was such a big thing that he wanted them to see it. And so he called his disciples over, and he says, truly, I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the contributors to the treasury because she put in all that she had. You know, of all the things in society that strip us of our dignity, probably none more than poverty. to not be able to have, to provide, to dress like someone else, to be like someone else. When you're a child in school and you're unable to dress like other children in your school, you're unable to maybe have clean clothes or good clothes, it strips you away of your dignity, of who you are. Poverty makes it hard for us to be seen on the same level as the people around us. The very definition of dignity is to be worthy of honor or respect. And if we don't have money, if we don't have the ability to even dress ourselves properly or feed ourselves properly or do things, it strips away that dignity, doesn't it? And more than the idea of being hungry, more than the idea of being not clothed the way that we should be clothed, or being able to maybe take care of ourselves the way we should take care of ourselves, what poverty does is it strips away the very fabric of our dignity. And that's something that Jesus saw here with this woman, and that we see every day in our society. So poverty is another thing that strips away our dignity, doesn't it? You know, another thing that happens often is our race or our religion, depending on what part of the world we are, or who we are. All those things can make us less worthy of honor and respect in the eyes of the people around us, right? You know, this is so evident in the Bible, and I think it's something only in the last few months have I really spent a lot of time thinking about, is the prejudice that exists within Scripture. The prejudice against the Gentiles, the prejudice against the Samaritans, the prejudice against one another that we see throughout the Scripture, right? And I think as we see that prejudiceness involved there, in the idea that these people who were looked at as less worthy, not worthy of honor and respect, no dignity there with the Samaritan. The woman at the well, how they chastised Jesus for the woman at the well for those things that happened, and they chastised because in Jesus even uses Samaritan as example, right? When we talk about the Good Samaritan, you know, the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus uses it as an example because they looked down upon them because of who they were, because of what they were. And that's something that can happen to all of us. And that's something that cannot be our fault. We're not our fault how we're born, the color of our skin. That's not something we have a decision in. And yet oftentimes people hold those things against us, what country you're from, or how we speak, or any of those things. And yet those are things that people can hold against us. And that because of that, it's race and religion sometimes that strip away our dignity, that strip away who we are. And as I thought about these things, and I thought about taking care of my mother recently and Ruby recently, and I thought about how more than the problem of being sick, of being poor, more than the problem of being handicapped, more than the problem of prejudice, the biggest problem that we face is how do we give people back a sense of dignity, a sense of pride. I think that's something as Christians, you and I need to be concerned about, because I think Jesus was concerned about it. And if I want to be like Jesus, I think I need to think about how Jesus dealt with these situations. And Jesus did some things, and I tried to really quantify it. How exactly did Jesus deal with all these situations? With the sick, right? Because didn't he have sick people? Lepers, right? Woman's with the issue of blood. He had handicapped people. He had the lame. He had the blind. He had the deaf, right? He had poverty, people in poverty, obviously all around him. He fed the multitude. He dealt with the widow's mite, right? He dealt with people who were different than him, Samaritans who were looked down upon. And I thought all these things that strip these people of their dignity, that strip these people of their pride. And one thing Jesus did is he gave it back. And I'm like, how did he do that? And so I try to quantify it. How do you give people back dignity? Right? How do you give that back to them? Wouldn't that be the greatest blessing for some people, to give them back some of their dignity, some of their pride? I think it would. And so I thought about how Jesus did that. And the first thing I thought is one thing Jesus did is he always stopped. It doesn't seem like a big thing, does it? But it is a big thing. Because when people are this way, we tend to look over them. We tend to rush through it, don't we? I do. Because we want to get it over with. Right? Just being honest. Right? Some of these situations, we just want to get through it. Just want to get it over with. Jesus was methodical, wasn't he? He stopped. And that's a big thing. He listened to what they had to say. The neat thing about Jesus is he talked to people. He didn't talk at them. That doesn't seem like a really big thing, does it? But it's such a big thing. Because sometimes when we're dealing with people who have lost their dignity, they've lost their pride, they're in some sort of a situation, whether it be illness or age or health or whatever it is, sometimes we tend to talk to them. I catch myself doing that. I talk at them. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. This is what you have to do. Right? And we don't talk to them. If you really want to take away somebody's sense of value, don't listen to what they have to say. I mean, that's the first way you can totally take away somebody's sense of value. Don't listen to what they have to say. Just talk. And talk over them and do it your way. And don't listen to what they have to say. You know, Jesus had the unique ability to connect with people because he talked to them and he listened to what they had to say. He didn't just talk at them. You know, I see that with children so much. And it's so easy when you're a parent. And I did the same thing. I used to talk to my kids all the time. I talked to them. Talked at them. Right? In some point, I had to listen to them. What did they have to say? Jesus had the unique ability to do that, didn't he? But the biggest thing is because of that, he gave them value. He made them important again. He gave them a say in what was going to happen, what they were going to do. I think that's so important that we as Christians look at Jesus and look at how he restored dignity to people. Not just how he restored their health, not just how he made them walk or see, but how he made them people again, society, members involved, and how he gave them back life. Because isn't that really, as Christians, isn't that what we should want to do? Isn't that what we want to do to get them to that point that they can do that? Because he understood, right, that he had to get them from an intrinsic to an extrinsic value. And, you know, because Jesus understood that we all have worth. We're all souls. We all have value. All of us, as long as we breathe, we're all human beings, and we all are created in the image of God. And we should understand that we have value within us just because of who we are. But Jesus wanted them to know that it wasn't just because of who they are that they had value, but because of what they were, because they had extrinsic value. You know, the worst thing you can do to somebody is take away their purpose, take away the reason they had to live, take away the drive that they have to get out of bed in the morning. We have to have a purpose in life. We have to have a reason to live, a reason to get up, a reason to do things. And when we strip that away from people, we strip away their dignity. We strip away the value that they have in their own mind and in the minds of people around them. And it's terrible. Because of all the things in life we have, sometimes the most important thing is the respect of the people that we're closest to in our lives around us. Isn't it? Isn't that important to us, to you? As a child, isn't it important to have the respect of your parents? As a parent, to have the respect of your child? As a husband or a wife, to have the respect of your spouse? You know, my mother always said that love without respect is pity. And sometimes that's where we get to in society. We have love without respect, and that's just pity. And who of us in here wants to be pitied? Who of us wants to be pitied? None of us. You and I should understand that we are just a step away, a day away from being that person that somebody else has to take care of. To being that person that's sick or that's handicapped. To being that person that's in poverty. To being that person that's somebody looks down upon because of who you are, what you believe. Brethren, we're all just a day away from being that person, from being the one that goes from being the caregiver, right, to being the one that needs to be taken care of. How do we want to be treated? How do we want people to act when we're in that position? How do we want to be addressed? We should ask ourselves these questions as we deal with people around us who are in that situation. Jesus commands dignity, doesn't he? He tells us we're all created in his image, all of us. From the little bittiest baby to the oldest person in the world, we're all created in the image of God Almighty. In Matthew 7, Jesus says that everything, therefore, treat people the same way you want them to treat you. You know, I've read that a lot in my life. The golden rule, we call it, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But the truth of this verse is that should be for any stage in our life, right? Imagine yourself being in the position of somebody having to take care of you, of being that person that needed to be cared for. How would you want people to treat you? How would you want them to talk to you? How would you want them to act around you? Well, that's how we should be when we're around them, to do to them as we would want them to do to us, right? Because Jesus commands dignity. He commands it. You know, if you look at Ephesians 6, it says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother." You know, it's funny. I've often read that verse as a kid, and it kind of made sense as a kid. Do what mom and dad tell me to do. Don't get in trouble. You know, that's kind of how I thought about it as a little bitty kid, right? But the truth is that I'm always my parents' child. And even though I'm almost 60 years old now, they're still my mother and my father. And I'm still their child. Am I not? And the Bible doesn't say just to take care of them. The Bible doesn't say just to do what's necessary for their survival. The Bible commands us and commands me to honor them. I didn't realize how hard this verse was to the last year of my life, really. But the truth is that this is true. This isn't a maybe, an if. This is commanded. It's brought back forth in the New Testament. Several places, is it not? This is Ephesians, Paul's letter, right? Honor your father and mother. Honor them. Not just take care of them, not just provide, not just make sure they got the necessities of life, but to honor them. The Bible commands dignity. It commands us to treat people with respect. In Romans, Paul says, be devoted to one another in brotherly love, giving preference to one another. Listen to what he says, in honor. In honor. Doesn't he? That's a command for you and me to treat each other not just with respect, not just with respect, not just with kindness, but to give one another honor. Now, I don't know how you take that to mean, how you take that word to mean, but to me that means that I'm to lift people up. I'm to set them on a pedestal. I'm to make them more important than I am. Isn't that what honor? To give honor to someone? You're making them more important than you are. The Bible says we're to treat each other with honor. With honor. And that's not just a maybe. That's a command. It's a command to do it, isn't it? But listen a little bit further what Paul says in Romans 12. He says, be of the same mind toward one another. Do not be haughty in mind, but associate with the lowly. Do not be wise in your own estimation. Paul says associate with the lonely. He doesn't say with the lowly. He doesn't say just take care of them. He doesn't say just give them a little money every once in a while, give them what they need. He says associate with them. He means don't just talk at them, right? Talk to them. Associate. Let's go a little further. Romans 12:21. He says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. You know, it's so easy to be cruel in this world. It's so easy to blame people for their misfortune, to say it's their fault. It's so easy to pass over things, pass over people. Jesus says we have to be different. Jesus says evil will never overcome evil. Only good overcomes evil. Only good ever triumphs in the world. And you and I are supposed to be a force for good in this world. We're supposed to be a force for what's right in this world. And the way we do that is we have to give people back their respect, their dignity. We have to treat people like God would treat them, as valuable. Because there's not a person alive in the world today that's not valuable in the eyes of God. You know, this time of the year, we kind of see it all, don't we? Christmas time coming up, a lot of stuff going on, people everywhere, crowds. We see all kinds of people, don't we? See all kinds of things. I don't know. Come our way. I don't know. But I hope this morning, as you listen to this lesson, I hope we think of the words we use, our actions, how we respond to the people around us. And I hope that we truly treat people the way we would want them to treat us. And I hope that we treat them with respect and with dignity and honor. Because this isn't just a suggestion that Jesus made, it's a command. We need to give and treat people the way Jesus would treat them. It's so easy in life. Things change so fast, don't they? Things change so fast sometimes. And you never know, you might be the one. You might be the one needing help. You might be the one. And how do you want people to treat you? How do I want people to treat me? I think those are questions we need to ask ourselves. It's such a blessing to be with you this morning. I hope you have a blessed week. If there's any way that we can help you, won't you let it be known while we stand and sing.